Okay. Hello, everyone. This is interesting. This is new.
Ah.
Oh, how lovely. So, welcome, everyone. This is truly a new, exciting experience being part of producing an online convenient conference like this. I'm so lucky that I'm here with Adah Parris. Welcome, Adah.
Good morning, Ida. How are you?
Welcome to the crowds.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
You are a futurist, a culture strategist, Afro-punk storyteller, enthusiast creator of people, patterns, and stories. And as I know, you're a captivating live speaker, because I know I have seen you live at the House of Beautiful Business. And what an energy. Just so now we are here. So here we go.
Yeah, I'm very curious the training in an online platform.
Exactly, and that's the thing. I'm trying to be like,
Well, as you know, I'm normally jumping around the stage, so we'll see.
Let's jump in the kitchen. So a lot of us are thinking about change these days. There's a shift. Are we going back to normal? Are we not going back to normal? When will this end? Will it end? Should it end? Is this, in your eyes, in your views, is this pandemic and the situation, well, not only pandemic, but financial crisis and general systematic huge shifts, is it depression or is it an opportunity, or what are your reflections that you're making yourself these days?
Lots of questions around, lots of questions there. So for me, I think the starting point is we keep using this word normal. And people talking about the new normal. And I think that where we are now, when we look back, we can see that actually what we were experiencing before wasn't normal. And it makes us question what that was about. Initially, a lot of the responses around when the pandemic started to spread, initially a lot of the responses were quite privileged ones. People, so the idea that we should all stop working or that we should or change our situations, a lot of those were very much around privilege and started to highlight the difference between the haves and the have-nots. And for me, that was a really big moment of recognizing that even though a lot of us in the West are going through our own situation, we're still very privileged. We still have choice, we still have opportunity. And that's the way that I choose to look at this whole pandemic, is the fact that many of us do have a choice. And we can see this as, rather than seeing this as a quarantine, I see this as an opportunity to change. I mean, I look at the idea that when everything started to happen, what I did is take a step back to look at what does the world really need? What do we need to be doing out there? Rather than just rushing out to put lots of stuff out there. I noticed that there's three kind of key lessons that I thought that we can learn from the pandemic. The first is that it doesn't recognize human boundaries and human borders, the country borders that we have created. The virus can, as we have seen, it is hitting us as a species and it's not recognizing those borders. And so for us, the idea of, in a way, almost acting like the virus, in that we don't dismantling some of those borders. So the idea of decentralized problem solving, coming together, ignoring the borders to try and do that, is an opportunity. The second for me was looking at the way in which we're seeing the resurgence of hyperlocal communities, of these smaller communities that are recognizing people. They're more based on empathy and compassion rather than ability to pay or gender or sexual orientation or any of these things. And I think that there's great power and opportunity within those, because what we're seeing is that actually all of us are problem solvers. And to me, problem solving is innovation. And so this is another opportunity for us to make a decision about how we try and solve problems with the most basic of, of what we have. And the last bit, as an opportunity as individuals, is that we've all been forced to stop or slow down in some way. And actually it's an opportunity for us to really reflect, take a step back and look at what kind of ancestor do I want to be? What is it that I want to put into the world? And so for me, I really do look at this as devastating as it is, and we cannot take away that, and I don't want to negate that, because so many lives have been lost and impacted in so many ways. And especially we have to also include those who we haven't measured. There are so many lives that have been impacted. So yes, it is devastating, but I also think that it is an opportunity for change and transformation. And we have to we can choose to take responsibility for that.
Exactly, yeah. And also kind of, we are in this time that we are in, but we are not disconnected from our future. You're talking about ancestors, and what can we learn actually by looking at our past, and maybe learn from the past to know what we can do for the future somehow.
Yeah, well, in the previous normal, as we want to call it.
The not so good previous normal, that one that we might not want to go back to.
The idea of going back, the idea of going back, we can never go back.
Yeah.
But I think that if we look at how we behaved during that time, we spent a lot of time either being quite reflective and nostalgic, or we spend a lot of time focusing on the future and not much time actually focusing on the present. And I think that's where the powerful bit is actually this whole pandemic has enabled us to focus on what is happening now. And when we start to think about, where we are, how did we get here? Then we do need to look back, because for me, when I started to look around the idea of ancestry, especially in relation to technology, what I did was I started to look at what's our relationship with technology? How do we behave? And a lot of that, what I saw, the patterns that I recognize, is that the way that we use tech is as if we're looking for a new religion. We're looking for something bigger than ourselves, to connect with ourselves, with our environment, and with each other. And what I mean by that is, if we look at artificial intelligence, the conversations that people have around AI gaining consciousness, there's this other, there's something bigger than us. If we look at spirituality, there is this deity, there's something bigger than us. And if we look at other worlds, there's other worlds that have this idea that there is a separation between it and us. To me, if the behavior is the same, the only difference is the tools or the technology, then why wouldn't we look back? Why wouldn't we look at other things, other ways? An example of that is, to bring it down to, and give some context. An example of that is blockchain. So blockchain, decentralized systems, trust and transparency. Now the idea of blockchain has been around for years. But however, if we look further back, if we look back to ancient Mexican civilization, Tenochtitlan, excuse me if I've mispronounced that, but it is an ancient Mexican civilization that used decentralization as a way of irrigating their land. So they had these floating gardens. Now that is an idea of decentralization. It's also commonly known in Africa in the way that families were named. So there are examples of how some of these old belief systems, or some of the ways of connecting with ourselves, of telling our stories, of connecting with each other, that we use today as digital or algorithmic technology, actually the same idea has been occurring for centuries. And that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah. And you're currently also working on, a new intellectual conversation, like a new ism. It's one of your more current projects. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, please? Because it's like, these conversations that we can have here today really also brings in an opportunity for our conveners to connect and work together and continue to develop the conversations and build on each other. Before, it was very much like this one-off kind of events.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's actually about platform and say like, how can we use these platforms to continue and develop maybe an updated language for our times?
I mean, that's why I love what you're doing here, because it is about curating those conversations. So just following on from what I was talking about in terms of how I recognize these patterns, what I did was I spent about 5 years just mapping all the patterns that I saw and trying to look for where they connected. And it actually started with recognizing that it started with a conversation with a guy who's a cyborg, and was asking him why is he implanting technology into himself. And he said it's because he wants to connect with himself. He believes that that's future human, wants to connect with himself, connect with his environment, and connect with others. There's a community of people who do that. Now, for me, what he was talking about was exactly the same or very similar to the language and the reasoning that people give for going down the shamanic route. There are different tools, plant medicines, what have you, that people use, spiritual meditations, to connect with themselves, their environment, and with each other. And so when I first started, it felt like they were either end of the same spectrum, the cyborgs and the shaman. And so I brought them together. My desire was to, if the behavior is the same in those worlds and the only difference is the technology, then why can't we bring those two worlds together to try and solve problems? Because there is no hierarchy in the validity of the tech. So that is how Cyborg Shamanism was born. And now where it's got to is that I use the word cyborg to get us to think about what does it mean and what could it mean to be human and what could we be capable of? And that's the roles, responsibilities, the ethics, everything. And shamanism, on its most basic terms, is about actively seeking other ways of knowing. And so what I do is I bring those two worlds together. So the cyborg shamanism is about creating spaces in the on and offline world for those conversations to happen. And the basis of that is actually SDGs, Sustainable Development Goal 17, which is about partnerships for the goals. So what I'm doing is I am creating this space where we can come together with the collective wisdom, knowledge, and intelligence of including those who sometimes those intelligences, those ideas, that wisdom that's been othered, and bring them together where there is trust and transparency, decentralized blockchain, to be able to do that. So I've now created a space for that to happen, a platform for that to happen, which is ism.earth.
It's kind of, because we're tapping into spiritualism, it's tapping into, I would say, existential things that is updated in our digital forms or presence, but as technology has always been part of our human expression and more like defined as an art form. And now are we narrowing our understanding of technology in these times?
I think that we, to a certain extent, we have, because when we talk, for a lot of people, when we talk about tech, they're talking about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
To me, technology, when we go back to the etymology of a word, it was about process. It's a tool that can be used.
Right.
It's a tool. And that's the way that myself and the Net Global, I've curated a global network. The people within, the beautiful humans within the network all see technology as a tool. It is a means to helping us to achieve what it is that we want to get to or where we want to be. And so whether we use algorithmic, digital, quantum technology, or we use, if for spirituality, it may be a religious book, or what have you. It is looking at what are the tools that the essence of that is the same, our behavior around it is the same, because then we can look at how we can bring that together to try and create new innovations, new approaches to solving problems, because everything is connected at the end of the day.
Yeah, and technology is made by us humans. It is a tool made by us humans. So it's basically it can be used for good and it can be used for bad things, and it's about us and our like connecting to our nature and kind of, you know, deciding if we want to, you know, how intentions we are putting and how we are developing our technologies.
Well, that's the key word. It's the intention. What is the intention? What is the intention of designing the technology? What's the problem that we're trying to solve? And how do we define that problem? Because what I'm looking at doing with this community, what we're doing is we are in a way upending the innovation process, so decentralizing it. So it's not one person defining what the problem is from a top-down perspective. It's actually a bottom-up perspective where we are working with people, with individuals who may be experiencing that. And together we come together to, first of all, redefine what the problem is. So, for example, I was having a conversation with some activists in Costa Rica around designing something around climate change, where looking at climate change in Costa Rica. So they work in indigenous cultures, you know, policymakers, all those sorts of people, to help them redefine what the problem is, and then look for the solutions within where they are. So that they become, their lives, their experience, their wisdom becomes a part of the process.
Yeah, and having technology working, I would say, with us and for us as the tool we created and not against us, and you know, really mentally kind of challenging us, and those intentions is needs to be part of that the conversation that we are creating now, which is a spiritual connection on like who are we and who are our tools. It's like we forgot about the ethical and existential conversations in like part of this development.
Well, I mean, I'm making a generalization here, but I believe that a lot of the community, the catapult community, are people who haven't forgotten that, and that's why this community works, because we're looking for those conversations, to have those conversations that reflect who we are, but also we can then expand them into the work that we're doing. And so that's why I'm appreciative of being here, but it's also why I see myself as a curator, because conversations are happening already. All I'm trying to do is create the space, or all I have done now, because it's launched, is create the space for some of those conversations to happen, where there is a process that we have, that we use, that brings together, that means that we are looking at harnessing the collective intelligence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's very key. And I think our tagline this year is "The future is one," and we are doing this together. It's not something like you and I. It's like the togetherness and the oneness going forward will be key to actually, well, to not use the word normal, but creating a sustainable, equal, kind planet for you know, us and all our friend species that lives here, right?
Well, exactly, because you know, we are not alone. We are not alone here, you know, and we as when I say we, I mean we as humans are not the only species, or we have assumed the role of the dominant species within the planet. But actually, there is, and that is why also nature, you know, natural systems and biomimicry are also part of cyborg shamanism.
Yeah,
it's looking at ancient wisdom, natural systems, indigenous cultures, all of those things, you know, to bring together the lessons, to try and recognize the patterns. That's what I do. I recognize patterns across different worlds. And cyborg shamanism, or ism.earth, is a network of people who are pattern recognizers, who come together to say, well, this is what I've recognized here, and this is what I've recognized here. How can we now come together and use that as a means of innovating for future humans?
Amazing. In about 11:30, everyone is invited to join a more intimate and open discussion on this topic with you. I just wanted to ask any last things that you want to share about your mindfulness hack during these times, resilient practice, dreams, or well, we were like, you know, paths for the future.
Mindfulness practice. So mindfulness to me, I've been meditating for years. And mindfulness to me is always about observing myself. It's observing oneself.
Yeah.
And so I remember when I used to first started meditating, I had this idea that I had to clear my mind. And the more I tried to clear my mind, the more the stuff. And then I would become frustrated. And actually, I've learned that really mindfulness is observing oneself. And so this whole pandemic has given us the opportunity, if we choose to take it, to observe ourselves. And so every day I start by being present for myself and seeing what emotions I'm feeling, what is it that I'm feeling, and how can I channel some of that? Because this whole, we are all riding the waves of emotions and frustrations and all sorts of stuff. So I start by being present for myself. I then do 30 minutes of yoga. And then I do 30 minutes of a deep sound meditation. And, I have got back into cooking because I love cooking.
Oh, yeah. A lot of people have. Oh, my God.
I'm not baking, but to me, cooking is alchemy.
Yeah.
And there's the idea of mixing all of these different smells and textures and flavors together. So I love the whole process of those smells combining and emerging. And to me, that is exactly what I'm trying to do. It's alchemy. That's what we're all trying, here, is bring those different things together to create something new and beautiful that is nourishing.
That is nourishing. So I have a beautiful yoga teacher, and in every session when he ends his class, he's saying, be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good takeaway from this. Be kind to yourself. Review yourself. Don't, think that you should clear your mind from meditation, or nourish yourself, and just be good to yourself. And then,
since the lockdown and the pandemic, my email sign-offs to people have generally been wishing you a productive and nourishing day or nurturing day.
Yeah.
Because I think that it's important that people remember that we are all in this space of vulnerability. Moving an offline conference to an online conference is a sense of vulnerability as well, and stepping into that and recognizing that we're all going through that.
Yeah.
It brings a lot of what we're experiencing at the moment is bringing us closer it has the potential to bring us closer together if we allow it to.
So let's try to do that. Thank you so much, Ida, for being here. And you will jump over to in 30 minutes, about 30 minutes, to open Q&A.
Okay. Lovely speaking to you. Thank you.
Good speaking to you. Thank you. Bye.